Get you a hype squad, everybody. Get you a hype squad. Hello. 11 o'clock. I am not Pastor John. He doesn't own pants this color. So, I'm just kidding. He might. That's true. He might. I'm just kidding. Pastor John, if you're watching and everybody online, sorry. I am so excited to be here today. A little bit, also when he said, hey, Trish, you want to talk? And I was like, you sure you want to give me a microphone for a little while? Okay, sorry. I'll try to get you out in time to eat, okay? But let's just go ahead and get started because like he said, storms, fire, it's my passion. So I want to share a little bit about that with you today. But let's turn first to Matthew. Chapter 14. You're going to recognize the story from last week. It's a similar story, but I feel like Mark left out a really big, important piece of this situation, so we're going to talk about it today. Matthew 14, verse 22. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Everybody say, the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, say saw the wind. He was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Now, last week, if you didn't watch, Pastor John talked about the storms that are there for a purpose and that the boat serves a purpose and we have to get in the boat and we don't jump ship. That was his last point. Sometimes you got to hold on. But sometimes he's calling you to step out of the boat. Sometimes there is something in your life that has stirred a wind inside of you, that has stirred you in a way that is urging you in a different direction. And it might feel unfamiliar and it might feel scary. Maybe you're in a storm and you're like, I don't know how to get out of this. It feels uncertain because you don't even know what life is going to be like after this storm. Some of you, the storm exists only in your mind because it's something that you believe or don't believe about yourself of what you can and can't do. If you don't know me, I guess it was maybe a year ago, we talked about words to live by, and it was my first introduction to you guys to speaking up here for Pastor John. And I moved to Lincolnton, since I'm now from Lincolnton, in 2019. I've been here for a really long time. We moved here in 2019, and it was a stepping out. It was the last, final, first move. I am married to a military man. Because I'm on stage and we can't, you want to just give a round of applause for my handsome boys here who are all dressed nice. And because they hate it, and all three of them are together, and they matched, and so they gave me a microphone. I'm married to a military man, and we moved a lot of times. Before that, I was the oldest of 3 kids. I grew up in Augusta, but my dad was into drugs and alcohol. And it was in January of 2019 that the first major hurricane, it felt like, came into my life. So my younger brother died from a drug overdose at my dad's house. It was not like the storms I had experienced before, like being the first to step out and go to college and move away. It was like trying a new job, and those are all kind of storms because it's uncertain and you're not really sure what's there. But then there's a hurricane where it's like everything is wrecked. Everything is wrong. Everything is hard. It then spiraled into a series of storms of back to back to back, and what was deployments and more loss and more grief and more loss and more grief and person after person, and it was cancer, and then it was just one thing after the other. And I was like, whoa. I went to school for business and marketing and love to hype people. I love to MC events and get everybody excited. And so feel free to talk back. It's great. I love that. But when it got to this point in the storm, something stirred in me. Something stirred that said, there's something here. There's something that I'm calling you out of, that we're going to use your gifts not for what you thought, but we're going to use it for something different. And so I believe that the storms today that we're talking about are the storms, not just externally, the storms of increase, like Pastor John has talked about, the storms that are storms of faith, the ones that we create. We've talked about all of those, but what about the ones inside that nobody can see? The battles that we face, the wind and the resistance that we feel, what we believe about ourselves, and the mindset that you walk into this church service with, because the Bible, these words are true. They're rock solid, but what you believe about them can change with the wind. So today I want to address that today, because I do think, as I was praying, and I'm like, why me, Lord? Why am I going to go up here and talk about this? Even though it's my passion, it's always scary, okay? It's always scary. Stepping into something that God has called you to is always terrifying. But when I sat there thinking, I thought about the patterns that I've experienced over the past few years in every group and organization that I'm a part of. In every place that I go, I see people starting to come alive, daring to dream, daring to share. I would love to do this. I would love to be this. I would want to do this, sharing their passions. And I believe among the body of believers, God is calling people out of the boat. I believe he's calling you into something. And maybe it's not this grandiose stand on stage and deliver a message. Maybe it's just forgiving, loving, healing. Maybe you're being the first to break a series of generational curses that you don't want anymore, and you're taking a stand. Maybe you're the person that said, I'm going to start that thing. I'm going to do that thing. And so today, this is about a storm that isn't just the surrounding storms, but it's the thing that storm maybe puts you into, the next miracle that you might be willing to experience, and the doubt that you might feel. One thing that I've learned about mindset is that you'll always live in a way that is consistent with how you see yourself. And your fear will point to your feelings about what you believe about God. It's in your financial struggles that you really question, God, are you really a provider? Your doubts become real heightened in the midst of a tragedy. Anybody know what I'm talking about? God, are you there? Do you even hear me? I feel like I'm crazy. I know everybody's experienced that, because it doesn't have to be statistics. We all suffer somewhere. It might just be like, I'm really having a hard time getting my sleep cycle right. That feels like not a big deal to you, but have you ever gone a few weeks without sleep? Everybody's storm is different. The depth of the grief that I experienced was a storm that there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. There's no formula. Everybody grieves differently. Every loss I experienced, I grieved in a different way. How do you survive something when you don't have a formula? How do you get out of the boat into your next step when there's nothing but wind all around you? Today, I want to look into the passage and see if we can relate to Peter in any way. See if maybe you've been in a situation like this, and then give you some tools to be able to walk in these seasons, to step out of the boat. I'll try to do it in time for you to eat. So let's see if we can see this. If we look at the story, we go back into Matthew, we say, so basically here's what's happening. Storms are all around you, okay? Maybe it's internal, maybe it's external. It just feels difficult. They're like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. In the context, if you read the chapters before, you'll see that Jesus had just fed the 5,000. Technically, I guess it's like 15,000. But he had just performed this crazy miracle. The disciples are like, we're tired. And he's like, get on a boat. Cool. If you saw last week, Pastor John had Palmer up here holding the buckets to represent the buckets of fish that were the actual miracle that Jesus had just performed on the land. And they are stressing about this wind right now. How many of you have been in a place where you're like, storms are raging all around me? Okay, we're feeling it. And then you go, our natural default. Okay, God, okay, you're there. I came to church. You're never going to leave me or forsake me. Okay, God, you're going to be there. Maybe it's you. Peter said, God, if it's you, call me out. He didn't know if it was him. It looked like a ghost. To all of the disciples, they're like, it's a ghost. Hey, man, that is a ghost. And Peter's like, hey, if it's you, God, because, Peter's got that gutsy little attitude, that little sass that gives him the confidence to do things like that. And he's like, look, if it is you, go ahead and call me out. How many of you have been in a season where, all right, there's some things, I'm not sure. Okay, God, where you at? All right, I'm going to church, I'm doing my thing. And then Pastor John gives a word. And you're like, God, I got this. I'm walking out that door. I'm awesome. Jesus, you got me. It's amazing. It's wonderful. And then all of a sudden, Jesus, I'll do anything you ask. It's great. Lord, I'm ready. I feel a little uncertain. It don't matter. The storms ain't going to break me. It's awesome. And then Jesus gives you a one-word command, like love, forgive, heal, say yes. And you're like, hold on. Jesus told Peter to come. That's it? Like, what's it gonna feel like? See, I need the full instruction manual. I need to know when I step out, ask my husband. He hates this about me because he wants me to have blind faith and just trust whatever crazy idea he comes up with. And I'm like, I need the full step process on what's gonna happen, what's it gonna feel like, and if I step out, approximately how far am I gonna walk before you catch me? If I sink, what are all the rules? Lord, if you could give me all the details, I'd be great. That'd be awesome. And you know what he says? Come. Oh, okay. Cool. Okay. Like right now, or maybe in a few, the wind's gonna, that's it. How many of us have had a command and God called you to do it and you're like, yeah, but I just. You think Jesus is gonna hold you accountable for those things that he's putting in your heart that you keep avoiding because you're afraid that you didn't have all the steps? So then, fine, we'll do it, all right? Okay, Lord, we'll do it. All right, I'll come to you. I'll start. And then all of a sudden, we're like, okay, it's shaky, I'm freaking out. And then we have self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and I should not be on stage talking to these people, and I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. Mayday, 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 hold on. But then Jesus comes to the rescue. How many of you experienced that cycle in your life in some form or another where you have been like, okay, I love you, I see you. Okay, you want me to do it? No, I'm not. I feel like that's the whole Christian faith. So let's just where we are. It's just cycle after cycle in this situation. Storms affect us all. Storms affect us in one way or another. But certain storms reveal something about God's character that you're going to need on the next stage of your journey. Some storms are in place because Peter needed to see that God is faithful and that he is going to call you to step out. And between two miracles, there can still be another miracle. That there is something that in the midst of the storm and in the boat, God says, it's time. This is you. Our self-doubt stops us. We say, okay, but what if I sink? What if I stop? What if I fail? You called me to start this business, but what if it doesn't work? I know you asked me to do the ministry, but what if nobody comes? I know you asked me to make friends with that person, but it looks like she's got a lot of friends already. Yes, I know that these people are going to the hospital to visit this person. I don't know, maybe I should not. We talk ourselves out of it because we want all the strength and we want to feel so ready to do what it is God is calling us to. But 2 Corinthians 12:9 says this, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. God's grace and his love for you has not been misplaced because the storm is staying in your life right now. There are storms that sit. Sometimes the uncertainty, sometimes the unfamiliar sits for a little while because God is trying to reveal something to you, and maybe we aren't going to listen because we are in our own head. The wind is everywhere. It feels like this internal battle that's happening and we're not really sure and we don't know what's going on, but God is trying to show you the depth of his grace. It wasn't when, as I mentioned before, when my dad died, it felt like the loss of a prayer. Because when I was a little girl, I remember holding hands in youth group praying for this man, and I'd seen all these dads come back, and it was amazing. And he never really did that. He there were things that kind of happened, and it was something that I was like, I really wrestled because out of all the other grief and the anger and the things that come with tragedy and storms, because that's what those feelings produce, it brings out stuff in us that God says he brings it out of us so he can wipe it away. The storms, the hardships, we start to get into that fear and that uncertainty. And God, do we really believe that you're gonna do this? Do we really believe that you can heal? Do we really believe these things? And we really wrestle. But God is trying to reveal something to you in that moment. And as I sat there and my dad died, and y'all, nobody even knew. When I called to check the hospice place, I was like, oh, sorry, he died. I remember sitting there like, how can I experience this peace that Heather was just talking about when something like, it felt like the loss of something. But it made me challenge what I really believe about God. Do you believe that he's gonna use even this, Trisha? That he never leaves you and he never forsakes you, and that you're lacking nothing if you just look around? Peter, it says he saw the wind. Now, how many of you can see wind? None of you. You can't see wind. You can see everything the wind affects. You can see the palm trees blowing sideways. You can see the doors slamming wide open. You can see the waves crashing. And Peter saw the wind after he steps out of this boat. How often do we step out in faith and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, everything is going wrong. And really we're just making all these things up to give us a reason to not walk forward any longer. But what if the wind is a sign that you're actually going in the right direction? If God said, Jesus is like, go get on the boat. There's a rogue hair that's trying to mess up my message. If Jesus says, get on the boat and go, don't you think everything has a purpose? He knew what he was doing. The mountaintop, the cool breeze from the mountaintop that he could see out on to the Sea of Galilee. He can see out there. Then it's paired with the heat from the Mediterranean Sea. And says this area is known for violent winds. So that they shouldn't be shocked that this is a thing that's happening. And Jesus knew what he was doing. Don't you think he knows what you're doing? And the wind was on purpose to reveal something about Jesus that they needed in that moment, even after the miracle. Sometimes, y'all, they had just, if you go back to Mark and talks about their hearts had been hardened, they forgot. Y'all, it was like 5 minutes ago. They fed 15,000 people with a couple baskets and nothing. And they get out on the boat and they done forgot. How often do we do that? Where we're like, okay, God, thank you for providing. You were amazing. It's awesome. And then the next day we get into fights and arguments and we're just like, no, this is it. I'm done. That's it. How often do we do that? But what if the wind is a reminder and is our wake-up call? It's time to step out. There's something here. When you experience tension, what if you looked at it and said, God, what are you trying to show me about yourself in this? Maybe we need to experience that faith. Maybe we need to experience the boldness and the courage. Courage can't exist unless you're afraid. To take courage, you have to take a step. Some of you are so caught up in this storm that's happening in your mind. You've looked at yourself in the mirror. You've convinced yourself you're not enough. It's not good enough. It's not going to work. You've already done this. Everybody's already going to think something. It's okay. There's enough of those people. I can heal tomorrow. I just need one more. I just need one more thing. And you've convinced yourself and you're still sitting in the boat. What I said, you will always live in a way that is consistent with how you see yourself. The beautiful thing about the Bible is that God tells you what he sees in you. But what about that gap between what you believe about yourself? For that split second, Peter was like, man, I'm gonna get out of this boat and I'm gonna stand on this water and he walked, y'all, he walked on water. Mark left that piece out. But one thing, actually, I forgot to tell the first service, and I sat there just sitting there. I studied this a little bit more. I was trying to figure out why Mark would leave out such a big, I feel like it's a big deal. Like, it's one thing when Jesus does a miracle. Like, eventually you're like, yeah, miracles are his thing. I mean, it shouldn't be like that, but that's how we get, isn't it? Like, oh yeah, I expect you to show up. It's fine. But It's so funny because Mark was a disciple of Peter. Peter was on the boat with Matthew. After Peter had stepped out, after Peter had walked on water, and after he experienced sinking and he sat in that moment and Jesus rescued him, Peter said, it's not about me. It's not about me. So as he tells the story to Mark, he's like, leave me out of it. This is God, because the point is God's gonna calm the storm. He's gonna handle everything. And it doesn't matter that I did everything and then whatever and failed. Matthew's like, nah, man, I'm gonna tell people about that one. But I told you gotta have hype people. You gotta have somebody that tells you about it. We all experience this self-doubt, this uncertainty, this imposter syndrome, y'all, all the time. And especially with women, I work a lot with women and they wanna start a business or they wanna do something new. And it is amazing how much us girls will talk ourselves out of. Nah, I can't do that. No, she wouldn't like that. No, it's crazy. It is amazing. It's my favorite thing to be like, hey, you said you were gonna do that. Hey, you were gonna do that. Maybe you should keep going, because there's something in that little wind storm that you're feeling. There's something in that uncomfortable feeling that you're having that God is trying to pull something out. Maybe it's something about him. Maybe it's something about you. But the storms we experience, they're meant to show us something. The Bible says in there in verse, let's go back to verse 31. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? Jesus, there are 11 of my friends sitting back here, and I done stepped out into this crazy windstorm, and I walked like with you. Like we did the same. We were like the same for like a minute. So why are you telling me I have no faith? But it says you just had little faith. Do we know what the Bible says a little faith can do? What God can do with a little faith, it can move mountains. One of these commentaries I read, it made me laugh because as I started studying this and learning, coming up here, I feel like I need to know everything about this passage that was ever known about this passage so I could tell it to you, to over-prepare here, like I said, the whole steps. And I read this commentary and laughed out loud because it's in a beautiful literature, amazing. And it said, Peter doesn't have no faith. His faith is just not functioning properly. Do y'all ever have faith that just doesn't function properly? You're like, oh, I believe for it kind of, but I'm not sure. Like, I'm not really. Just me? Okay, that's full. I thought the 9 o'clock was just because there were 9, but y'all, it's just me now. Cool, sitting out here. Thanks for that. We're gonna play like, I don't know, Simon Says here in a minute. Just kidding. This is something that I love sharing because everybody wants motivation. And they want feelings, and they want it to match. They want to wait till it feels right. They want a sign. I need another sign. But Jesus said, come. He said, love. He said, having done all to stand, he said, stand. Somebody I was praying with, they like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Sometimes we don't get to know what to do next. You don't know. God said, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. The lamp light is tiny and small. It doesn't light the whole way. But some of you feel called to something here. It's everywhere. In the world that we live in, everything that's going on, it stirs something. All you have to do is turn on the news and it will tell you what you feel about what is happening. Some of you want to do something about it. Some of you are like, forget this, I'm done with it. Some of you are like, I need to take care of my family. There is an urgency with any resistance that you begin to feel. It brings something out of you that is unique to you. I, with everything in my being, believe God created each and every one of you with a story, with a message, because the way you endure your storm, the way you endure your storm, is way different than the way I did. Sometimes the people around us don't need my method. My husband makes fun of me for being Mrs. Positive Polly or whatever he wants to call me. And he's like, why are you so positive all the time? That is the way God made me. I can see out of it. That's just a gift that God has given me, and I will always see the bigger picture. I will find something good in everything. And he's like, you crazy. That's just how I am. Some of us, though, need the real conversations. I need somebody to bring me out of the clouds every now and then to say, Trisha, but these are the facts. So that we can marry that. We need each other. But how can I get your support if you won't step out of the boat? If you're looking and you're letting your mindset and what you believe about yourself completely dictate the fact that God is calling you to something or through something, and you don't believe you're good enough to receive it yet. That's not what the Bible says. But that storm is inside your mind. The motivation to get out of the boat will not sustain you in the wind. How many of you made New Year's resolutions and you're like, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna read the Bible in a year, and I'm gonna go and it's gonna be amazing? Or you heard the storm on the first series message on storms, and you're like, these awesome storms have increased, I'm not gonna let it break me. And then you cried yourself to sleep that night. And you ate Twinkies and you are no longer on that workout plan. For me, it's Krispy Kreme donuts. It is not Twinkies, but also, everybody has their food of choice. And you stopped. Motivation gets you maybe started that, yes, Lord, I got a word, let's go. But if you don't make a decision, well, I'm gonna tell you right now, that motivation is gonna fly right away with the wind that's right on in your brain, and it's gonna stop you. And the resistance, because the enemy doesn't want you to get out of the boat. He wants you to sit with the 11 chilling behind you, because there's a miracle outside of the boat, but you must actually move into it. With a one-word command, with a one word, any moment, and you're gonna have to be like, Lord, this is it. And how do you build that faith? Unless you do it scared. You can't. We all want big faith. I think Pastor John said this, or one of the people I was listening to. We all want the faith that moves mountains, and it's amazing, but how do you build it? Little by little, it's a muscle that you have to exercise by slowly stepping out of the boat, by standing up. Sometimes you just gotta stand, okay? He had to stand first before he got out of the boat. Sometimes you have to start somewhere. The wind isn't gonna go away. I'm sorry if that was news to some people. It will be there. And if the wind externally is beautiful, and your bank account's amazing, and you're driving a new car, and everything's wonderful, and your marriage is on point, everything's good, you're about to get married, life is good, you got a brand new job and a promotion, awesome. You still look yourself in the mirror, and the first thing the enemy's like, you don't deserve none of this. The wind's gonna come somewhere. Y'all don't have to admit to me where it's coming from, but it exists in everybody. So how do we walk with the wind? Now, I teach fire, so fire is my thing, and through all this series of teaching, I'm a word person, and I love to come up with good analogy, and I love to have acronyms because, when we study, we remember. Do y'all get the point? The Lord loves me so much. He's like, Trisha, stop asking for all the details. Stop making me give you a word for everything. But he was nice to me on this one. So I have a framework when I teach people how to walk through fire. But fire is hot, and it's uncomfortable, and it is very visible, and it's very palpable. So that's more of an external storm, I guess you would say. Fire is one thing. So walking through the fire, God will be there with you. But what about the wind? What about the wind when the one that you don't see? How do you do that? Well, we take little notes from Peter. Peter taught us how. Number one, the W says watch for God. Y'all know it's gonna be W-I-N-D. Go ahead and make your bullet points if you're taking notes. I like it just like. One is watch for God. Psalm 139, 7 verse 10 says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. Where can I go from your spirit? Nowhere. He's everywhere. He will never leave you. He'll never forsake you. The reason you don't see him is because you're looking for him. And sometimes God doesn't show up looking like God in the middle of a storm. Sometimes he looks like a ghost, or the random friend that you never saw coming that showed up in the midst of your tragedy, or the people that supported you when you were in your darkest moment. Sometimes it was the right doctor that just happened to fly in at this one time that gave you the diagnosis that there's a possibility that we can heal you. There is God everywhere, but sometimes he doesn't look like we thought. And if you're not tuned, we're gonna see the wind. So the first thing you have to do is watch for God. Watch for him to show up. Because he's going to show up in a way, because what he's going to do is somebody else was called to step out of the boat, and you're the person that person was called to help, and that's the way that he moves. So it's not God in a neon sign all the time. Sometimes it's your brother and your sister and somebody beside you. It's a moment. It's a sunset. It is in every single thing. Where can I go from your spirit? You are there everywhere. Look for him. I imagine the possibilities. This is what I do a lot with people that I'm working with. And a lot was done with me when I was starting these businesses or whatever. A lot of business people love to do this. Mindset, you get in this, you envision yourself where you want to be. But this is so biblical. They don't know that. They teach it however they want to teach it. But it's biblical because in Romans 12:2 it says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. It's your mind. Because like I told you earlier, the self-doubt, the imposter, I don't know, the mind, when we imagine, we can imagine the possibilities. What happens if I quit this habit? What happens if I restore this relationship? What happens if I do the thing God is calling me to? What happens if I step out? It begins to generate excitement and enthusiasm. We all of a sudden became this power, and God will fuel that. You'll walk in the miracle without even knowing it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm moving towards it, because you're bringing to life something God has birthed inside of you. Or, what if I fail? What if I don't? I don't know. That's what Peter did when he started to sink. But Jesus was there. Watch for God, because even if you start to go down and you say, oh no, but Trisha said, watch for God and imagine the possibilities. Turn your mind, transform, renew your mind and say, no, what if it works? What if it did happen? What if this generation and the next generation is going to benefit from what I did and the decision I made today? What if it did? That keeps you moving forward because your eyes are on the Lord, you are imagining what is next, and you are walking on the water. You're walking in the impossible. Isaiah 26:3 says, you will keep in perfect peace whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Just like Heather said this morning, it's perfect peace, but your mind has to be steadfast. The wind, storm that exists but right here is got to stay steadfast, and you've got to look. Because in the midst of tragedy, and I'm telling y'all this because this is my life, in the midst of the hardest things, in the midst when you don't know if you have the strength to get out of bed in the morning, when you're not sure what's next, watch for God. But what if I get up and still show up as the mom that I was called to be? What if I serve and love and hug the sister here whenever I come? What if we were running behind and everything was crazy and we still come to the 11 o'clock service and we still just show up? What if then God moves in those moments? How often have you felt resistance in something and you did it and you're like, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm gonna do it. And you have felt the resistance the whole way there, but then you did it and you were glad you did. Have you ever experienced that? Our feelings and the motivation are not going to sustain us because we're going to hit the wind. So let's watch for God. Let's imagine the possibilities, and is never look back. If Peter turned and looked around, it says he saw the wind, which means he done made up a whole story that there was like a tornado beside him, and he started freaking out. He done convinced himself that he's doomed and everything's terrible, and it doesn't matter that Jesus is right there. He's terrible and it's awful, and we're done. That's it. And also, they're my friends sitting all over there, 11 of them just sitting. Hey, Peter, you shouldn't do that, man. That's crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy for wanting to start that business. You're crazy for stepping out. But nobody in your family's ever done that before. Nobody's ever been able to quit drinking. Nobody's been able to do that. Why? We're just mean people. I don't know how to do that. How many excuses do we make for ourselves? When we go the other way, we look back. Don't get me started on the Israelites who they were they're out in the wilderness. God is providing for them every day. And they're like, maybe slavery would be good because this uncertainty thing is not my jam. Took them 40 years in the wilderness because they got so crazy thinking, I'd rather just be beat and enslaved than wait on the uncertain moments. In Genesis 19, when they were God was destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. There's a speaker or teacher that I love to listen to. She has a beautiful message on this because she was reading a verse in the New Testament that said, remember, when Jesus said, remember Lot's wife. And it got her curious, and she was like, what about Lot's wife? Like, most people are like, what about Lot's wife? Like, what'd she do? There's like a story about her. There's no book in the Bible about her. So if you go into Genesis, it's you read back in there 19. Feel free to read the story. It's really juicy and good. But God is going to save Lot and his wife and his family because they were the only ones found to be good enough to save. Let's just say that. He was going to save them, and he said, y'all got to go. He's about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot's wife looked back, and she turned into a pillar of salt. I don't know what that equates to today, but I feel like it's bad. So I feel like I'm good not being a pillar of salt. You know what I mean? I feel like we can't look backwards because it's familiar. And my mom, bless her, sitting in the front row, she can tell, I had all these ideas, and I went to college. I was like, I do not know. This was my 5-year plan. None of it came to pass. However, I knew the person that I wanted to be and the things that I wanted to do. And so when it aligned with it, and God knew, it was like, say yes to this, yes to this, yes to this. And that's who I am. And sometimes it doesn't look like I thought. Sometimes it's serving in this way or using my gift in this way. But I knew in my head, this is what I was going to do. God, that you showed me, and I'm going to move forward. Because backwards is not something that I want to do. Not that I don't love my family. Not that I don't love the way that I was raised. But there was something that God was calling me to that was different. You have to be willing to get out of the boat. You have to be willing to see it in other people and call it out of them. And I believe that is something that God has given me, is to see when people come alive with those passions and say, yes, let's do it. Yes, you can do this. Because I feel like we need more people in our life like that says, yes, I believe in you. Why not try the thing? Because every time you step out in faith, something is built in you. Whether you learn something about God or yourself, it's always useful in the next season moving forward. Always. And I don't care if it's a failure. Philippians 3:14 says, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. He goes towards the goal. And ain't nobody running a race and going toward the other way. Let's go back toward the start line. Oh my God, it's great. Let's go back. Nobody does that. Everybody press towards a goal. Some of you right now just need to identify the goal. You need to say, what is it, God, that you are calling me to? Calling me out of? What are you calling me into? What is this resistance in my mind that maybe the only wind I'm experiencing is what I believe about myself and whether I can or can't do something? D, don't be afraid to go first. We can get I don't know if anybody's in here, the music folks, I don't know where yeah, there he is. I can't see, she was right, these lights are really bright. My boys have been running a lot. Running is like their thing. My boys have been running, okay? Some people, I don't know. They haven't convinced me just yet. But they've been running a lot. So we love sports movies, sports everything, sports analogies, everything in our family is sports. We love it. And one of the things we were discussing recently, because my son's been running a lot, is Roger Bannister. And if you don't know who Roger Bannister is, he was the first one to break the 4-minute mile in 1954. Up until that point, it was like this elusive, nobody could get under 4 minutes. There's no way. Like physically, it's humanly impossible. We can't do that. And all of a sudden, he breaks it. Sure enough, 6 weeks later, there's an Australian comes and does the same thing. And in the next year, you've got person after person just running the 4-minute mile, like just doing it. Oh, this is what we do now. What changed? Did all of a sudden the human everything inside of us, all of a sudden we're built different? These are grown men. It was the mental model. They saw somebody do it, so they believed they could. Some of you today are afraid to be first. You're afraid to be the only one. What is it going to look like? I don't know. I can't tell you. Every day is uncertain to me right now. I'm like, I have no idea. Pastor John's like, you want to talk about storms? Sure. Because you know what happens when you say yes to preaching about storms. You experience them time after time. All of a sudden, I don't like my husband anymore. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. I don't like you. It's fine. Storms, y'all, it's in my mind. You know what I mean? It's something that happens. But the mental model, the storm here, what's stopping you from going first? What's stopping you from being the bold one, the one that says, I am going to be the first to say I'm sorry? If you're married, you know how hard that is, you know? You don't ever want to be the first to say I'm sorry. It's all his fault, it's not mine. Sometimes you have to go first. You're the first to break the cycle, the first to discover that there's a new way. Maybe you were diagnosed with something and you met with this doctor and you're like, hey, we're gonna try something new. That's scary. Like, don't experiment on my body. I'm good, I'm fine. Sometimes it's the first cycle of addiction. Sometimes it's the first anything. Maybe you married somebody different. You took a job that nobody assumed you would take. Maybe you just said, I'm gonna believe in myself today. Today I'm gonna work out. Storms exist in everything we feel. But when the wind is present, if we look for God, we imagine what it would be like if we actually stepped out. We don't look back and we press towards the goal. Then we say, I know going first means it's gonna be scary. There isn't a formula. I don't know. The first big loss I had in my life, I didn't even know how to grieve. How do you do that? Uncertainty is certain in your life. I feel like it's the one thing you can count on, that there's gonna be some uncertainty in your life at some point. Maybe not today. Maybe it's rainbows and puppies for you right now. Awesome. I want you to put this in your back pocket for if somebody cuts you off at church. You know what I'm saying? Like if somebody cuts you off, just remember the resistance I talked about, okay? Because it's gonna happen. Today I want to stand. I want to read to you a verse that is something that I share on all of these boxes. I send out fire boxes, grief boxes, and things and items that I send out to people, because when I walked through it, it was like, what can I do now? And that became an outpouring of what I love to do, is help people in their storms and their fires and their darkness, and help them to see that God has a purpose in it all. And the Bible verse that's on the boxes says, Isaiah 43:2, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flames shall not consume you. This is a promise. You have to step out into something. The winds are gonna come, the rains are gonna be there, the fire might be there, but he promises to be with you. It says immediately Jesus reached down and saved Peter. He didn't let him float for a minute and freak out just to teach him a lesson. You know, like some dads would do. He was immediately there. The minute you start to sink, okay, God, I'm gonna step out. Oh my gosh, immediately he was there. And the wind isn't just resistance and the hardship. The wind is also the Holy Spirit. If you read in the New Testament, it's a fresh wind. How do we know the next step? How do we know what you're trying to say, Lord? How do we know if this is right? You take a step and you wait for the Spirit to move you in that way. He will be there, but you have to invite him. You have to invite him. So today, let's go ahead and stand. I want to sing some songs. If you want to pray, if you feel like it's a time that you want to step out, or maybe you're just experiencing some resistance. Maybe you're like, I don't know. Maybe this was on time. Maybe it wasn't. If you're here and this is something that you want, I want you to come. Sometimes you have to step out. Like I said in the first service, the last time I was here, I had people write on cards and write what they didn't know how to do. Because we get stuck in how do we do this? How do we do this? And I had them write what they didn't know how to do, or what they didn't know how, but now they do know. And all of you flooded, and it is amazing to see what you didn't know how to do, but you were willing to admit it. And sometimes just being willing to admit it is all we need. So I don't have to pray with you. We can get all the other people here. They can pray with you. But I want you to be willing to step out and say, God, I don't know. Show me. Because he will. He will show you the next step. He will show you and he will stand there, but you have to look for him. Y'all, you can't be trying to do it on your own because, we see the wind. We crazy that way. But I listened to the words this morning to a worship song that said, all of a sudden, you won't see wind. All of a sudden, you won't see rain. Jesus said, stop. The storm was gone. All of a sudden, it can change in a minute. But sometimes we have to step out first before we see him calm the storm. Sometimes he wants to exercise our faith in a way that we've never experienced it before. Sometimes the storm is the only place you can do that. So let's sing, let's pray, let's do whatever. Let's step out if you need to. Sometimes the act of stepping out and stepping down here, just pretend like this is all your big boat. Feel free to be the only one, you know what I mean? But I'll be here, so let's worship.